It was the kind of rain that made you forget the sun ever existed. I had been on my feet since 5 in the morning. 11 hours in a sick room will take something from you. Not your joy exactly, just the part of you that knows how to pretend things are fine when they are not. My scrubs were wrinkled. My shoes were soaked through. My stomach had been running on one granola bar since 7 a.m., and it was now past 8 in the evening. All I had to do was pick up Mrs. Romano's medication from the grocery store and go home. Simple. Easy. 5 minutes. The man in the black coat had other plans. He was standing dead center in the entrance lobby, both hands in his pockets, eyes on his phone, completely still in the middle of a doorway, like the rain and the rushing city, and the entire concept of other people did not apply to him. He was tall, not just tall, but the kind of tall that makes a room reconfigure itself. Dark hair, a jaw that looked like it had been carved by someone with a grudge, an expensive coat that probably cost more than 2 months of my salary. I did not slow down. I was tired and wet, and I had 30 minutes before the pharmacy section closed. He did not move. The collision knocked the paper bag clean out of my arms. His phone scraped across the tile floor. I stumbled into a shelf, caught myself, straightened up, and looked at him.
He looked at me.
His eyes were very dark and very calm. The eyes of a man who had never once been surprised by anything, and they were looking at me with the specific, icy expression of someone deciding whether to be irritated. "Watch where you're going," he said. Low voice. Flat. Like someone reading a statement rather than having a conversation. I looked at my bag on the floor. I looked at his phone. I looked at him. This immovable, expensive man standing in the center of a doorway during a rainstorm like he had been placed there specifically to obstruct my evening. "Maybe," I said, picking up my bag slowly, "you could try not standing in the middle of an entrance like a piece of furniture." He blinked. Just once. "You walked into me," he said. "You were standing still in a doorway," I said. "That is not confidence. That is just being in the way." Something crossed his face. Quick. Almost invisible. Not anger. Not offense. Something that looked, for just a second, like the expression of a man who had been handed something he had no idea what to do with. "Do you know who I am?" he said. I looked at him. Very good coat. Very good jaw. The kind of face that belonged on a magazine cover for a magazine that intimidated people. "Someone who needs to step aside," I said. I walked past him, collected the medication, and did not look back. I found out later that his name was Fabio Romano, that he had just returned after 3 years abroad, that he controlled an empire this city whispered about in low voices and downcast eyes. I also found out much, much later that he had stood in that lobby for a full minute after I left, staring at the door I had walked through. But that night, I only knew one thing. The man was insufferable, and I hoped I never saw him again. He arrived at the Romano estate the next morning. I was in the hallway when he came through the front door, and we both stopped at exactly the same moment, in exactly the same way, the way two people stop when they are confronted with something that refuses to make sense. "You," he said. "Me," I said. "You work here. I take care of your mother. 2 years now." He looked at me for a moment with a focused, recalibrating expression of someone rebuilding a picture frame after the glass has shattered. Then he walked past me without another word down the hall toward Isabella's room. I pressed myself against the wall, let out the breath I had been holding, and told myself this was manageable. He was here to see his mother.
I was here to do my job.
Adults shared spaces, all the time without incident. That was before Isabella called us both in. She looked smaller in daylight. Her silver hair was fanned across the pillow and her breathing was shallow, but her eyes, those sharp, clear, seeing everything eyes, were as steady as ever. Fabio sat beside her bed and held her hand with a gentleness that had no business belonging to the same man who had stood in that grocery store lobby like a monument. I stood near the door with my clipboard and tried to be invisible. "I want you two to get married," Isabella said. "And not planned," we both screamed. "Never." The silence that followed was enormous. Fabio went very still. His jaw tightened. He set her hand down slowly, the way you set down something fragile that you are afraid of crushing. "Mama," he said quietly. "I am not confused," she said. I have thought about this for a long time.
She turned to me.
Alessia, your father is in prison, and his medical bills are more than you can manage alone. If you marry Fabio, the legal structures I have arranged will clear every debt and fund his care fully. The moment the marriage is real and documented, it is done. I stared at her, the woman I had spent 2 years with, the woman I had sat up with through her worst nights, the woman I had, foolishly perhaps, begun to think of as family. You are using my father, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. I am giving you an answer, she said gently. That is the same thing. Alessia.
No.
I took one step forward. You could have asked me. I would have listened. You did not have to use him. She held my eyes. Would you have said yes if I had simply asked? The silence answered for me. Fabio stood up. He was controlling something enormous. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, the careful steadiness of his voice when he spoke. I am not a clause in an arrangement, Mama, he said. I am your son. And that, she said, is exactly why I am asking you. Because you have never refused me anything that truly mattered. The look on his face broke something small in my chest. It was the look of a man hitting a wall he cannot fight, cannot reason with, cannot do anything about except absorb. He looked at me. I looked at him. I hate this, I said clearly. So do I, he said, with equal clarity. Isabella, watching us both, looked almost satisfied. The wedding was 11 days later, and it was the most beautiful, terrible thing I had ever walked into. The Romano estate had been transformed overnight into something out of a dream. White flowers everywhere, candles on every surface, a string quartet in the corner playing something slow and aching. The guest list was full of people I had never seen before, people who wore their smiles like armor and watched everything with quiet, assessing eyes. I understood, by the end of the first hour, that this was not a celebration. It was a performance for an audience that was deciding something. Fabio was already at the front of the room when I came in. Dark suit.
Dark eyes.
The same unreadable expression he had worn since the day I met him, except I noticed this because I was beginning to notice too many things about him. The line of his jaw was slightly tighter than usual. He was holding himself together very carefully. I walked toward him in the ivory gown Isabella had chosen, and I thought about my father, and I put one foot in front of the other. We said the words. They tasted like nothing. In the car afterward, the city slid past the windows between us, and neither of us spoke for a long time. Ground rules, I said finally. Go ahead, he said. I am not your wife in private. In public, I will hold up my end. In this house, my job is Isabella. That is it. You are sleeping in the master room, he said. Isabella's condition. The staff cannot see separate rooms from day one, or the whole story falls apart. I turned to look at him. And you agreed to this. I had conditions too, he said. Left side of the bed. No television after 10. I wake at 5, so keep the noise down before then. I also wake at 5, I said. And I make no promises about the television. He looked at me sideways. You are going to be a problem. You have no idea, I said pleasantly. In front of the assembled eyes of the most dangerous people in this city, he had placed his hand at the small of my back with a possessiveness so convincing I had almost believed it myself. Now, in the back of this car with no audience, he sat as far from me as the seat would allow and stared out his window. Good. That was how it should be. We were enemies with a shared address. Nothing more. I kept telling myself that for a long time. The bedroom was enormous, and it was not big enough. I had the bathroom first. I came out in silk pajamas, dark green, extremely unsexy by design, with my hair in a towel and my book in hand, ready to build a wall of dignified silence and maintain it for the entire foreseeable future. Fabio was at the desk on his side of the room, jacket off, reading something on his phone with the focused calm of someone who did not find any of this strange. I climbed into my side of the bed, opened my book, and stared at the same paragraph 4 times. Then the bathroom door opened. I did not look up. I was reading. The paragraph was very important. The hot water cuts out after 30 minutes, he said. I looked up. He was standing in the bathroom doorway in nothing but a towel.
Now.
I want to be precise here. I am a trained caregiver. I have a background in health sciences. The human body is not a mystery to me, and I am not someone who loses composure over.
He was not remotely fair.
There is no other way to say it. He was built like someone had drawn him specifically to cause problems. All clean, controlled lines, shoulders that belonged in a different century, water still running in slow tracks down his chest. He was holding a smaller towel over his hair and looking at me with mild, unbothered irritation, like I was a minor inconvenience, and not like he had just walked out of a doorway looking like that. The third button, he said. Then the second. On the boiler panel. Otherwise, it cuts out. I did not manage this boiler before today, I said, with great calm, looking back at my book. You have lived in this house for 2 years. East Wing. Different system. I turned a page. Your side, your problem. There was a pause during which he crossed to his side of the bed and the mattress shifted, and I kept my eyes on my book with the focus of someone trying to defuse a device. You have not turned that page in 5 minutes, he said. I turned it immediately. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. You are allowed to look, he said. I will not be offended. I was not looking. You had the face of someone trying very hard not to look. I put the book down and looked at him directly. He was leaning against the headboard with his arms crossed. He had changed, thankfully, into a t-shirt, and he was watching me with those dark eyes and a mouth that was doing the thing where it was almost, but not quite a smile. Fine, I said. You are not. The gym time is clearly not going to waste. Happy?
Can we sleep now?
I knew it, he said. Do not. You spent that whole car ride establishing ground rules, and here you are. I was noting, I said, clinically, as someone with a health sciences background. A clinical observation. Yes. Of my. I am going to sleep. I switched off my lamp. The room went half dark. Alessia, he said after a moment.
What? A pause.
The clinical observation, I could make the same one. You came out of that bathroom, and I lost my place on my screen twice. I lay very still in the dark. Good night, Fabio, I said. Good night, he said. And something in that word, just the texture of it, the way it landed, was slightly, carefully different from anything he had said to me before. I did not sleep for a long time. But for the first time since Isabella's announcement, what was sitting in my chest was not entirely dread. The days that followed were a cold war fought in close quarters. We clashed over the bathroom schedule, the thermostat, whether the window should be open at night, and whether it was reasonable to have a phone call at 6 a.m. without using headphones. Every argument was heated. Some were funny, in a miserable sort of way, like the morning I found his perfectly organized half of the desk and deliberately used a pen from his side without asking, and he noticed and said nothing for 4 hours and then brought it up at dinner so carefully and so precisely that I burst out laughing, which made him angrier, which made it funnier. He was insufferable. I was not easy. We were a disaster in a very large house. But we were, slowly, a disaster that was beginning to know its own rhythms. It started so quietly that I almost missed it. 3 weeks into the arrangement, I came downstairs at midnight for tea and found a cup already waiting on the end table beside the library couch. Still warm. No note. No Fabio anywhere in sight. I stood there and looked at that cup for a moment. Then I sat down, picked it up, and did not say a word about it in the morning. He started coming home earlier. I noticed because the house made different sounds when he was in it. The weight of his footsteps on the upstairs landing, the particular way he closed a door without slamming it. I was always in Isabella's room or the library when he arrived, and I always heard him check the kitchen first. I did not examine why he was checking the kitchen. One Thursday he came back from what must have been a very long, very brutal day. I could tell by the set of his jaw and the fact that he had loosened his tie to a point that, for Fabio Romano, was basically the equivalent of falling apart in public, and found me asleep on the library couch with an open book on my chest and a cold cup of tea beside me. When I woke up an hour later, there was a blanket over me that had not been there before. I did not mention it. Neither did he. You are rearranging my house, he said to me one evening, in a tone that was meant to be an accusation. I moved 3 books, I said. And I put a plant in the kitchen window because it is dark in there, and plants need light. I know where things are, he said. Or I did. You still do. The books are on the same shelf, just sorted properly. And the plant is good for air quality. He looked at the plant. He looked at me. It is a succulent. Yes. Those are for people who cannot commit to actual plants. Or for people with busy schedules who still want something living in their kitchen, I said. Which describes both of us. He stared at the succulent for a moment longer. Then, he walked past it to make coffee without saying anything else. The succulent was still there a month later. I caught him watering it once. He did not know I saw. He watered it every Thursday. I walked through that house, and I could not help it. I was who I was. I talked to the staff the way you talk to people who matter. I left food in the kitchen with notes about what it was, and when it was made. I kept Isabella's room full of fresh flowers because she had always liked flowers, and I saw no reason to stop now that she was fading. And Fabio, this hard, cold, controlled man who ran an empire and made dangerous people afraid of him, started rushing home. I am not saying he said that. He would never have said that. But I noticed the difference between arriving at 9 and arriving at 7. I noticed the way he always came to find me, not directly, but eventually for some reason to appear wherever I was. A question about Isabella. A document that needed my signature. A complaint about the thermostat that we had already argued about and resolved. He was coming home to the house because the house felt different now. He hated that he noticed. I could tell. I noticed, too. I also hated it. We were very much the same in that particular misery. The Mardi Gala was Fabio's first major public appearance since taking over leadership of the Romano family, and he needed me there. He told me this the way he told me most things, not quite as a request, somewhere between a statement and an expectation, delivered in the flat, certain tone of a man who had rarely been told no and had complicated feelings about the times it had happened. There will be people there watching every detail, he said. Every expression, every distance between us. If we look wrong, they will use it. I understand, I said. He looked at me for a moment. You do not have to be afraid. I will not leave your side. I am not afraid, I said honestly. I grew up around people who used politeness as a weapon. I know how to play that game. Something shifted in his expression. A brief, recalibrating look. Good, he said. The gown he provided was midnight blue. The diamonds at my throat were cold against my skin. The gala was held in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and the kind of wealth that does not need to announce itself because everything in the room already knows. Fabio walked in with his hand at my back, and the entire room rearranged its attention. I had known, intellectually, that he was powerful. I had seen the security, heard the phone calls, and understood the edges of his world. But seeing a room of dangerous men recalibrate in real time when he entered, watching eyes drop and conversations shift and postures adjust, was something different entirely. Something that settled in my stomach with a weight I had not expected. I held up my end. I smiled at the right people. I said very little and said it pleasantly. I watched Fabio move through that room the way water moves through a space, finding every weak point, every current, every pressure, and I thought, this is what he does. This is what he is. Then a man I did not know appeared at my left side while Fabio was across the room, and he smiled at me with too many teeth and put a hand on my arm with the easy familiarity of someone testing how much they could take. You are the new Romano wife, he said. You are much younger than I expected. And you are much bolder than is advisable, I said pleasantly and removed his hand from my arm with 2 fingers, as if I was moving something off a clean surface. He laughed. He stepped closer, and then Fabio was there. He did not push the man. He did not raise his voice. He simply appeared at my side and looked at the man the way a locked door looks, and the man took 1 full step back and found somewhere else to be within 3 seconds. Fabio's hand settled at my waist. Not gently, firmly, in the specific way of someone making a declaration. Are you all right? He said low near my ear. Completely, I said. Though I had it handled. I know, he said. I was handling it anyway. I looked up at him. He was still watching the direction the man had gone, and there was something in his face that was not the cool, strategic expression of a man protecting an asset. It was something rawer than that. Something that had not been calculated. He caught me looking. Don't, he said. I did not say anything, I said. You were about to. I was about to say, thank you.
He looked away.
You do not need to. But his hand did not move from my waist for the rest of the evening. And I could not help but notice, that he did not want it to. Isabella died on a Tuesday morning, while the city outside was still gray and the birds had not yet started. She went the way she had lived, quietly, without making a fuss, as if even her leaving was an act of consideration for the people she was leaving behind. One evening, she was tired. By morning, she was gone. Fabio was with her at the end. I stepped out into the hallway and sat on the floor with my back against the wall and my hands in my lap, and I waited. The silence from inside that room told me everything before he opened the door. He came out and stood in the hallway. His face was composed. His eyes were not. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. I stood up and put my arms around him, and he went still, completely still, the stillness of someone who has not been held in a very long time and has forgotten what to do with it. Then he exhaled one long, shaking breath that he had been holding since she took her last one, and he held me back. The funeral was 3 days later.
Cold.
Enormous. Full of people who had respected Isabella Romano's power and were now calculating what her death meant for their own. That evening, I stood in the master bedroom and looked at my open suitcase on the bed. The arrangement was over. Isabella was gone. My father was safe. The legal structures she had put in place were already running.
There was no reason left.
I folded a blouse,
Set it in the case.
reached for another. Alessia. His voice came from the doorway. I did not turn around. The arrangement was for Isabella, I said quietly. She is gone. You do not have to.
She said something to me, he said.
Before she died. She said, he is colder than he looks, but he loved you long before he knew your name. I went still. I did not understand it then, he said. I set down the blouse. I did not turn around. I was not ready to turn around yet. I am almost packed, I said. I will be out of your way before morning. The silence behind me was enormous. I heard him move. Then he was in the doorway of the bedroom, and when I finally picked up my suitcase and turned around, he was standing between me and the hall, arms at his sides, not blocking me, not exactly, but not moving either.
Fabio, I said.
The syndicate needs the marriage to appear stable, he said. Leaving now creates problems. Optics. There are people watching the Romano family right now, and any sign of... Stop, I said. Just stop. Do not do that. Do what? Use the business as a reason. It is not the reason, and you know it, and I know it, so please do not insult us both by saying it.
His jaw tightened.
It is a legitimate concern. Then say the real thing. My voice came out louder than I intended, and I let it, because I was tired and I was grieving and I had a suitcase in my hand, and he was standing in a doorway looking at me with the expression of a man who wanted to say something and had absolutely no idea how to say it. For once in your life, Fabio, say the real thing. I am not ready for you to leave, he said. The words came out rough, like he had dragged them out of somewhere they did not want to come from. The room went quiet. Because of the syndicate, I said carefully.
No, he said.
Then why? He looked at me for a long moment. The city was dark outside the windows. The house was very quiet without Isabella in it, a different kind of quiet, emptier, like a bell that had been rung and was still ringing somewhere you could not quite hear. Because this house was a tomb before you walked into it, he said. Because you put a plan in my kitchen and you talk to my staff like they are people, and you leave cold cups of tea everywhere like a trail, and I follow them, and I do not know when I started following them, but I do. Every night. He stopped. His voice was steadier than his eyes. Because when you walked out of that grocery store, I was annoyed. And when I saw you in this house, I was angry. And somewhere between the thermostat arguments and the library couch and the midnight coffee, I stopped being either of those things, and I do not know what to do with what I am instead. I set the suitcase down. Not gently. It dropped. You are the most frustrating man I have ever met, I said. I know. You communicate exclusively through implications and mild irritation. I know. You watered my succulent every Thursday. Something moved across his face. You saw that. I see everything, I said. I always have. I crossed my arms. My heart was doing something very loud and very inconvenient. I am not staying because of the syndicate.
I know, he said.
And I am not staying because of Isabella. I know. I am staying because I stopped. Looked at him. This impossible, infuriating, careful man who had never once, in all the weeks I had known him, stopped watching out for me without ever saying so. Because this house feels different to me, too. And I do not want to walk away from that either. He exhaled. Just once. Like a man who has been holding something for a very long time. He did not cross the room. He did not reach for me. But something in him settled, some wound up, held together, tension going quiet, the way a held breath finally releases. Leave the suitcase, he said. I left the suitcase. I found it on a Saturday afternoon. Fabio had asked me, in his particular way of asking things, which involved a statement followed by an expectant silence, to retrieve a file from his private office while he was in a meeting downstairs. I found the file. I also caught the edge of a small velvet box with my elbow and watched it fall in slow motion from the highest shelf. I caught it before it hit the floor. The lid flipped open. Inside was a toy. Small.
Wooden.
A spinning top on a little base, worn completely smooth with age, the paint almost entirely gone except for traces of the original color beneath. Yellow. I could still see yellow, chipped on one side where it had been loved past its limit. I stood in the center of Fabio Romano's private office, and I stopped breathing, because I knew that toy. I was 7 years old. It was a summer afternoon in the park near our old apartment, the crowded kind of afternoon where the paths were full and the benches were full, and everyone was somewhere they were going. And sitting on a bench by the fountain, with tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his face, was a small boy. Maybe 6, maybe 7. Everyone walked past him like he was part of the scenery. I had stopped. I knelt down in front of him. I wiped his face with the hem of my dress, which my mother was very unhappy about later. I said, "You're okay. I am staying here until your family comes." And because his hands were shaking and I did not know what else to do with them, I put my yellow toy in his hands. His family came an hour later. A terrified woman in an expensive coat. A tall man behind her. And behind him, moving more slowly, taking in the whole scene with those sharp, clear, seeing everything eyes. Isabella. She had knelt down in front of me while everyone else was pulling the boy into their arms, and she had held my small face in her hands and looked at me with the specific intensity of someone making a memory on purpose. I was still holding the velvet box when Fabio walked in.
He stopped.
His eyes went from my face to the box, to my face again. Something in him shifted. Something enormous moving slowly, like the ground deciding to change shape.
Fabio, I said. My voice did not sound like my voice. It was you.
In the park. By the fountain. He did not move. I wiped your face with my dress, I said. You were shaking, and I did not know what else to do, so I gave you the toy. My throat was tight. That was you. I kept it, he said, very quietly. Because you were the first person who stayed when they did not have to. Isabella had known. She had recognized me 2 years ago. The girl from the park, grown up and working in her house. She had said nothing and arranged everything. I opened my mouth to say something. I did not know what. Something large and broken and true. And then his phone rang. Not a ringtone. A specific, short signal that I had learned meant something was wrong. He took one look at the screen, and his entire face changed. Every soft thing that had been there a second ago was gone, replaced by something I had not seen in weeks. Cold, sharp, and very fast. Someone leaked your location, he said.
What?
They have been watching since the gala. They identified you as the pressure point. He was already moving, already crossing to his desk, already reaching for things I did not know he kept there. They took you as a leverage play against me. Fabio. You need to stay in this room. Fabio, I am right here. I have not gone anywhere. Not yet, he said, and his voice was so stripped of everything that for a second I saw all the way to the center of him, the place he never let anyone see. They are coming for you tonight.
They came at 11. I did not see most of what happened after that. I heard it, shouts, the specific sounds of controlled chaos, doors and feet, and orders delivered in a language I did not speak. I was in the room Fabio had put me in with 2 guards outside the door, and I sat on the edge of a chair with my hands in my lap, and I waited. They took me from a window. It was fast and dark, and I did not have time to be afraid in any organized way. One moment in the room. The next, nothing. What Fabio did to the rival compound, I only heard about afterward. The people who told me about it did so in low voices and with the expressions of people who had witnessed something they were still processing. All I knew directly was this. The door came open, and he was there, and the look on his face when he saw me was not the face of Fabio Romano, feared head of a criminal empire. It was the face of the boy from the park. He crossed the room in 4 steps, and he pulled me into him, and he held on with both arms and his whole body. This man who was always so precise, always so controlled, held on like a person who was terrified of what would have happened if he had gotten there 1 minute later. "I am fine," I said, against his chest. "I am all right." He did not say anything for a moment. "I know," he said finally. "I know." His men were behind him. All of them. A room full of people who had followed this man into something very dangerous tonight, and not one of them said a word because they could all see exactly what they were looking at. Something they had probably never seen before. Their boss undone. He stepped back eventually. Looked at me, really looked, the way you look when you are checking something and cataloging every detail. Then he exhaled and became himself again, gave 3 quiet orders, and we left. 3 weeks later, on a warm afternoon with the kind of sun that makes the city look clean, we went back to the park. Not for any reason either of us had said out loud. He had suggested it, or something like suggested, which for Fabio meant he had said there is somewhere I want to go and looked at me in a way that meant I want you to come, and I had said okay, and that had been the whole conversation. The fountain was still there. The bench was still there. The park was full of the same ordinary Saturday afternoon crowds, people and dogs and children running at angles that made no spatial sense. We sat on the bench. "I did not know it was you," he said. "For a long time. I just remembered a girl. The dress. The way she said, very seriously, like a much older person, 'I am staying here until your family comes.'" "I meant it," I said. "I know you did." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought about her sometimes. Over the years. I thought, wherever she is probably still doing that. Staying." I looked at the fountain. The light was doing something generous to the water. "Your mother knew?" I said. "The moment she hired you," he said. "She told me at the end. She said she had spent 2 years making sure before she said anything, because she wanted to be certain you were still that girl." He paused. "She said you were." "Exactly." I did not trust my voice for a moment. "She could have just told us," I said. "She could have," he agreed. "But then we would have had a reason to be kind to each other from the beginning. And we would never have learned anything real." I looked at him. This man who watered my succulent in secret and made coffee at midnight and stood in doorways when he was afraid and held on with both arms when he found me. "I fell for you," I said. "I did not mean to, and I argued with it for a very long time, but I did." "I know," he said. "You could say it back," I said. "I drove through 3 armed checkpoints tonight for you." "That is not the same as saying it." "Alessia." He turned to look at me fully, and his face had none of its armor. Just him, just the real thing underneath all of it, steady and clear and right there. "I have been in love with you since the thermostat argument." "That was week 1, I said. "I know," he said. "It was inconvenient." I laughed. He smiled, the real one, the full one, the one that changed everything about his face. He kissed me there, on the bench by the fountain, in the middle of the ordinary Saturday afternoon world, with the sun doing its generous thing on the water and the city moving all around us like it had somewhere to be. Sharp-eyed, completely satisfied. She had always known how this would end. She had just needed us to find out for ourselves.